Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lost in Translation Show, where we explore yesterday to understand what is happening to mankind today. This is Simone, your host. Today, we have a very special guest who many of my listeners already know from her channel, Michelle XX. And no, she's not in the adult entertainment business. XX stands for her chromosome, meaning she's a woman. She has been a big supporter of my podcast and a good friend. Welcome, Michelle.
Well, thank you for having me, Simone. I'm happy that you gave that explanation for me because sometimes people get a bit confused. Men have an XY chromosome and women have XX. Thank you for inviting me on.
Okay. Before we get started, I'm so happy to have you here today, but there's a few announcements that I wanted to make first. I do a backup channel on Rumble. You can always find me there if for some reason I am no longer on YouTube. The name of the podcast is Lost in Translation Show. I know sometimes people have difficulty finding my show on YouTube. It's best to look up an introduction to Lost in Translation. Otherwise, you'll get that show with Scarlett Johansson and Bill Murray, and that's not me. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And this is a request from my viewers. If you are comfortable with this request, please post the name of the city, state, or county that you are listening from. It would be really interesting for us to see who's watching and how the internet allows people to connect from all over the world. Perhaps one of my most distant viewers are two dentists that I met in Los Angeles from Benghazi. Hi, guys. With that said, let's get back to the show. As many of you are aware, the intent of my channel is to explain the origin and goals of societal and governmental structures, the ones that rule our lives. In one of my recent podcasts, we explored the connection between the transhumanist, eugenics, and transgender movements and their connection to the founding principles of the United Nations. As part of this attempt to explain these movements, we discussed the United Nations intent to start as a political organization and then become a spiritual organization that prepares the planet for the rule of Lucifer. Now, these are not my opinions, and this is the well-documented agenda of the United Nations, whose founder is the Lucifer Trust. This group plans to remove the male-female distinction and destroy the family unit. As many of you already know, and some of you will soon discover, many people in the public eye, meaning the entertainment industry, politics, and industry, are already transgenders. Not only that, they are gender inverting their children. These are not new, and they stem from ancient occult practices. The removal of the female-male distinction is a pretty profound and unusual goal for an entity funded by most nations on the planet, and a goal that few people seem to be aware of. Understanding that these people we look up to, who inspire us, who play on our favorite sports team, that say they're going to save our country, are not what they seem. Not only are they agents of the agenda just mentioned, if in fact they are gender inverting their children using surgery and medication, they are child abusers, and even worse. These same people who are constantly preaching to us about human rights and equity and diversity are depriving their own children of the right to control their own bodies and filling them with drugs and unnecessary surgeries for fame and fortune. So today, I have asked Michelle to join us so she can give us insight into these gender inverting practices that are based on her experience, because she has been working with hundreds of different public figures. This will include her insight into the gender bending practices of the royal families of Europe, especially the British royal family. Not only that, we will explore a brief history of the British royal family and the crimes their bloodline has committed against humanity over the centuries. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. Michelle, can you give us a little background on your career and how you came to understand the topics that we have under discussion today?
Well, thank you again, Simone. I would very much like to give you details about my educational background, about my higher education and my practice. Unfortunately, because of the nature of what I did, i.e., treating celebrities, I keep a very low profile in terms of disclosure about my specific medical practice. I can say that I gave medical treatments, but much beyond that, I don't elucidate.
Oh, yes, of course. We don't expect you to talk about anyone in particular. I'm just trying to establish to the viewers that you have worked and been in and around this, that it's not a conspiracy, that it's not something made up by the Q movement, that this actually is occurring among these groups of people that I just mentioned.
Indeed. I know that the internet is abuzz, especially YouTube, with misinformation and shills and people with outlandish beliefs, and forgive me, but some mentally ill people. But I don't happen to be one of those people. I have a unique life experience. I sought out my career and worked very diligently to get into the upper echelons of our society, i.e., treating these celebrities. And I can assure you that this life experience has altered my entire view of our society, our history, and our culture.
When I first learned about it, I had subliminally noticed this stuff for years. And it just came to my attention over the last few years when it's become so blatant and they're openly promoting it. So I started looking into it more. That's how I originally found you on the internet and started watching your shows. You confirm that you're in the medical profession, you have an education that teaches about people's anatomy, you're aware of the differences between men and women. Why don't we start there from a technical standpoint? I know on your show frequently you tell people you'll take a certain person and you'll break it down, but how about overall head size, sway of the back, things that we could easily notice next time we're watching a regular television program or some politicians on TV, so we can start seeing. I personally have a really hard time with the men, but I can tell the women pretty much right away. So you want to elaborate on that a little for the viewers?
Certainly. I typically have a visual presentation for folks because people see more when you have a picture in front of you and you can actually point out these distinctive differences. Whether or not people believe that there are differences between the sexes used to not be a question, right? For all of time and the annals of time, we have known that men and women have different anatomy. It seems like a given. But in this current culture, we are being told that gender is fluid and it is a construct. Well, I can tell you there are hundreds of differences down to a cellular level with human beings. The basic differences between men and women have to do with the skeleton. The skeleton never lies. Men have a larger head, men have a thicker neck, they have longer arms than women, they have a longer femur, that is the upper thigh. That femur is actually called the long bone. Their humerus bone, which is the bone between your shoulder and your elbow, a man's humerus bone will be longer than that of a woman. Women have, their arm length does vary, but it is usually roughly about 50% proportionally of your height. Men are approximately 60%. Yes, there is some variation, but in general, arm length is a telltale sign. The spine of a woman is naturally curved, right? Those 33 vertebrae, and I'm not dropping a gematria number. The reason they being these occultists, is because they find, they code dates and all sorts of things with gematria. But the human skeleton has 33 vertebrae. But on a female, it curves in the center of the back to accommodate the weight of a child. Men have a lower back. It's in their lower lumbar because they cannot get pregnant. Obviously, men have larger hands and larger feet and flat nail beds. And there are so many differences. But because of hormone treatments and advances in plastic surgery, it's becoming more and more difficult. One of the main benchmarks that doctors, as well as archaeologists and anthropologists, use for identification is the pelvis. A woman has a larger pelvis, a wider pelvis, and this creates space for the baby. It seems obvious, does it not? Men have narrower hips, but there's actually something that's called the Q angle. It is the way that femur sets into the joint of the woman. It puts it at a deeper inclination. This affects the stride. So men and women walk differently. Men and women have literally, I could go on, Simone. There are so many differences. But with Brazilian butt lifts and shaving of tracheas and shaving of brow bones and all of these elaborate surgeries, not to mention hormone blockers, human growth hormone. I mean, there's so many medical interventions to change the look of these celebrities. Have I said enough there?
I think you've got us started, and many of our viewers are already familiar with these concepts. One of the things I've noticed on many male actors and public figures is that their Adam's apple looks more like a little lever that goes up and down. It doesn't look like a real man's Adam's apple. So I
Yes.
looked into it, and apparently because they remove a rib or something, or there's something that they do, they take a part of the bone and they put it in there like it's the Adam's apple.
That's right. It is a manufactured Adam's apple. The trachea and the larynx of a man is anywhere from about 22 to 30% larger than that of a woman. And what actually creates the Adam's apple is actually hormones, right? When a boy goes
Correct.
through puberty, it is the hormones. It's actually thyroidal in nature. That's actually thyroid tissue that extends out. So these people get it shaved. The male to female get it shaved down, and it regrows because we are a slave to our hormones. Okay, and the female to male, like you said, go through various types of procedures trying to increase the size. These people are literally pasted together.
Well, it seems like it's so painful too, and they've been having these surgeries and these adjustments and in the cost. Where does I understand that some of the rich people have money, but it's a cult. There's people of all different ages and lifestyles. So I find that really confusing, and just the pain and the suffering that you have to go through. I don't believe that it's always to their choice either. Sometimes they're in the system and that's what they're having to do. So enough of that. Anyway, another thing that I've noticed is the man's head is so much larger. And I read this once, one of the sure ways to tell is there's 3 heads on a man's shoulder and only 2.5 on a woman's. Is that true? Or
That's precisely right. And
okay.
that has to do with 2 things. It is the larger size of the head of the man, but it's also that men have broader, straighter cross clavicles. The clavicle is the shoulder area, right? And on a man, it extends out further. So a man's head is larger and can fit approximately 3 head widths. Now, a woman can only do about 2.5. So these ratios are what I want people to keep an eye on. When you're watching TV, whomever is on television, I want you to look at that shoulder width versus the head. We've been conditioned since the 1930s when TV was on to see these women with strong mandibles. That's your jaw, angular jaws and big heads and wide shoulders. I believe that's why shoulder pads were instituted way back in the 40s films, right? And into the 80s. And it's to hide the broad shoulders of a man and to make regular women wear these padded shoulders. It's a cloaking device.
Well, just like the men's suits, because the men don't have shoulders, so they put in the big shoulder pads in a man's suit. So it's reversed. I completely agree with you about them using fashion. The way shoes are made right now, where they're so uncomfortable and high to wear because they make your feet look much smaller.
Yes, and that's another thing to mention about one of the differences. The reason that the high heel even became in fashion, do you think it's normal for us to walk around on stilts? Of
No.
course not. Women are leggier than men. Men have shorter legs than women do in proportion, right? I'm saying proportionally. Obviously, if you're a 6'5" man and you're married to a 5'2" woman, your legs will be longer. But I'm talking about the proportions of the body. And so the very reason for high heels was to elongate the legs of a man. In addition to that, it was to obscure the length of the arms of the man, right? It throws your eye off.
This is something else I noticed, and you were mentioning how in all the movies the women have had big heads and big eyes. The other thing is their big hands, and they frequently show the women's hands. It's like they're talking to each other because they use media encoding. This is a whole other show, but there's a lot of messaging and imagery and ritual things that they put in a lot of movies, and they frequently show the actress's hand and her ear, which is placed differently than the man's. But want to talk about how the man's ring finger tends to be a little longer? The woman's index finger is longer.
Yes.
Elaborate on that.
Yes.
These are
So
great
there's
ways
something
to tell when you're watching TV.
right. So there's something called the digit ratio. Okay. Typically on a man, okay, his ring finger will be much longer than the pointer finger. I'm trying to keep it basic for people. Okay. So women typically have very close to even in terms of their fingers. A man will have a shorter index finger. Okay. So it's, you can see these things if you look closely. And it's not just that. If you look at most of these actresses, their hands are large. If you take your hand and put it on your palm, the palm of your hand on your head, and you are a woman, your fingertips will typically go just above your brow. If you're a man, put the heel of your hand on your chin, and your fingers will usually go all the way up your forehead. The other thing is that women have a smaller forehead. Okay, I joke around and say, wow, that female to male has a 5 head, right? 5 fingers instead of 4. And I may make light of it sometimes, but these are differences that are very, very obvious. Women, if you're 5'2", you're not going to have a size 11 foot. I want you to zoom into these pictures of these celebrities. You will see these gargantuan feet and hands on a lot of these female to males.
Well, the Academy Awards was on last night, and they were out in full force. And I don't know if some of them is really them, because they definitely aren't hiding it very well. Possibly it's just age. But I also noticed there wasn't a lot of big stars there that have been talked about over the last few years. Did you see any of the show last night? I just tuned in for the final.
I did not see, I did not watch. It's difficult for me to watch the propaganda agents out in full force, congratulating themselves on fooling the public, because that's really what this is about. This is
And that's what
about,
they get the awards for. Yes.
yes, for fooling the masses and being a part of this mind control, because this is a subversive government operation that comes down from, you know what government means? It means mind control, literally. and they are perpetuating this. Now, I believe this comes from an occult practice that goes back to the aristocracy.
It goes back a really, really long time. I was just mentioning, we were talking about the Academy Awards. The Academy, the golden idol is Osiris, the Egyptian god who they all descend from, the royal family of Britain, the Bush family. Many people say they descend from the Egyptians, and Osiris is the god they worship. So that's literally the idol that is the Academy Award figure. And they
Indeed.
frequently open their events with "Hello Babylon." So this
Yes, they do.
conjecture.
No, it's not conjecture. And is it any coincidence that these people are getting a golden idol, literally a golden idol that is genderless, basically?
Exactly.
Faceless and genderless. It is not a surprise. And I agree with you. I believe this goes all the way back to the pharaonic lines. I believe that the pharaohs are still ruling us. The bloodlines of the pharaohs are still ruling us.
Well, what I've come to understand, if you read anything about the Anunnaki, a lot of people believe it's myth, a lot of people believe it's our true history, but the Anunnaki were not only practiced incest, which is the Egyptian and which is passed down through this Baal, there was some element of the transgenderism too. So these people practice, like Freemasonry is the religion of the Anunnaki. Freemasonry is the lower level of this 12-level system that these people that work in or live in, belong to, whatever you want to define. So now that we're talking about the different people in the public eye, I know you've done a few shows on the British royal family, and so many people pay attention to them. Every magazine cover when you go in the grocery store has their face on it. I thought we escaped their rule in a bloody war 200 years ago. So I'm constantly confused by this. And who cares if Harry and what's his name had an argument? I don't, people are so wrapped up in this stuff. And I try to tell people, and they're like, oh, well, they have all those children. I'm so concerned by people thinking that because they were gender inverted by their parents. What do you think these people are doing to those helpless children that they're raising? My concern, my show is about opening people's eyes and helping us not keep ignoring all this stuff that's right in front of us, and we continue to choose to worship these people and be persuaded by these people, and they don't have our good intention at heart.
No, they don't.
Do you want to elaborate? Maybe you can use some of the things that you talked about with Prince Charles, for instance, his backswing. Maybe you can use some of the things you told us, and maybe about the new princess, right? The little man from Los Angeles. Maybe you can break her down a little bit.
So, in terms of Queen Charles, and I assure you, Charles is not a real man. Now, I know that's shocking for some people, but you must realize that this is an ancient occult practice. If you look at the stride of these people, the way they walk, you can see unequivocally that they have the stride of a female. So this is why this is such a perplexing subject, Simone. The royal family, the House of Windsor, okay, we have Queen Charles, who said, well, we have to be inbred. It's just the way it has to be. Okay, so they admit to doing inbreeding and keeping that bloodline pure. In addition to that, Charles has bragged about being a direct descendant, the 16th grandson of Vlad the Impaler. Okay, I know most people probably know that it is Bram Stoker's motivation, right? He wrote Dracula based on Vlad the Impaler from 1431, where he was impaling his enemies by literally through the anus. Okay, it's a sick and morbid and brutal person. Okay, that King Queen Charles is proud of being related to.
Well, he still retains a home in Romania where all that happened. And
Indeed,
he
indeed.
claims it's his second home. Many people understand that stories like Hansel and Gretel have to do with the forests in that part of the world where they kidnapped and took children. There's been all kinds of scandals that's come out of the German forest in that area of the German royals actually having human hunting parties has been in the World Court and the World Criminal Court over the last few years. And some of the royals in Europe have literally had to step down because there was actually some children who lived and bore illegitimate children. I think in particular, I think it's either the Belgian or the Dutch prince or king had to abdicate to his son. So there's all kinds of these different horrific crimes that have been committed by this royal family throughout history. When you go visit the palace in England, the main attraction is their torture chambers and all
Yeah.
of the places they buried all of the children that were murdered by people trying to take over succession of the crown. So
I believe that Grimm's fairy tales, these horrific fairy tales that were, by the way, redone and turned much lighter hearted by Walt Disney, and we that's a whole nother show in and of itself, the Disney programming that has happened. But I believe that these people have been abusing, exploiting, and literally hunting children for millennia. Like you said, these stories that have come out, and I don't know if our listeners have heard about the disappearing Indigenous children from Canada when the former king went to visit, right? Missing children have always been associated with royal families from around the world. It sounds fantastical, but
well,
it's true.
I used to have a summer house by that orphanage, and it's in Kamloops, Canada. And they went there on their honeymoon trip, and 10 children disappeared. This is a really famous story. There's books written about it.
Indeed.
They visited that orphanage on their honeymoon. The 10 children went with them and were never seen again. Right before the trial, where they actually years later, there was a priest, that a deflocked priest, because he's exposed all these crimes and has actually brought things to the world court. He exposed this and talked about how the one witness that was surviving mysteriously died right the day before the
Yes.
Inquisition.
Yes.
But
Hey, Simone, isn't that where you went on your honeymoon, to an orphanage to take 10 children away?
of course, right between our resort in Cannes and our trip to London, it was right in there.
I mean, it's madness. It's madness that, but these people have been ruling us with impunity. They can do whatever they want, and they
Well,
have been.
according to Princess Diana's book, and you can delve into Princess Diana, what I believe she followed in the same pattern. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
really love her, but
Yeah.
if you read her book, they sent Jimmy Savile, the necrophiliac and
Yes.
pedophile, in as
Yes.
her marriage counselor when she
Yeah.
was having marital issues. And of course, his crimes were covered up. He was a radio celebrity and went on behalf of the royal family charities, etc., to visit orphanages and abuse the children. So
Yes, and to be honest with you, Simone, I don't know the genders of the people that you just talked about. I would love to think that women don't abuse children, but unfortunately, these elite, whether there are real women, real men, or somewhere in between, right? They are abusing children. Savile is a savage example of a person in the public eye who was looked over. He was welcomed into Buckingham Palace anytime he wanted.
that's what I'm saying. I believe he was a
Disgusting.
child trafficker, and so do
Yeah.
many other YouTubers, if you follow the story. Of course, he died a few years ago, and all this supposedly was exposed, but it was being covered up by the media and the royal family. And again, what the heck was he doing at the royal palace? What was Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein always doing there? There's definitely something very strange going on at Buckingham Palace.
And it's always people who have a predilection towards children. And I think this goes back to Baal, right? Sacrificing your children unto Baal. And I've always said that I think these wealthy people get, first of all, it's their religion, but I think they have these grotesque minds where they do the most depraved things to children. I don't even want to think about adrenochrome. I don't even want to think about what they probably do to these children, but we know these people are evil. I really would encourage listeners to stop following them in these magazines. Who cares what the princess wears? Most of these people are gender bending occultists who do not have our best interest at heart and who have done heinous things to children.
Can you break down maybe Camilla and Kate?
Oh, goodness gracious. I mean,
they're kind of obvious, to be honest, especially Camilla, but everyone's so in love with Kate, and she's retained her size 2 figure after 5 children, supposedly.
This is because Kate
does
not have a womb. You must have a womb in order to give birth. If you look closely at Kate's anatomy, despite the millions of dollars worth of hormone treatments, hormone blockers, and massive amounts of surgery, that person has the skeleton of a man. And what they do is they use glamour and money literally to put a spell on the public. This is why this is linked with misogyny, and this is linked with the hateful, they hate the public, right? How many women have looked at these celebrities who have allegedly given birth, and then they pop back on and they're on a fitness magazine at a size 0 all over again?
I've worked on a couple movies. I've worked on a couple movies where a couple well-known actresses supposedly had a baby the month before, and there's no way.
There's just no way. Women gain weight all over their body.
Well, they're supposed to.
Yes. And even the stomach is distended for a while. Now, when you breastfeed, it does actually cause a contraction of the uterus and actually helps. But still, you can't, it isn't even physically possible to diet down that quickly. It's because these people, and why do they have no stretch marks? They have no stretch marks because they never gave birth. I don't know where they get these children. It may be their genes, but it's done in a laboratory.
Well, you can go online. They have artificial wombs now. There's plenty of information. They've actually been growing baby in artificial wombs for some time. And a lot of people believe that's what's going on there.
Right. And we have surrogates as well, right?
Of course.
So.
Or possibly the male who's living as a woman goes away on vacation for a few months.
Right.
He's having the babies. Correct?
I would encourage some people to Google Britney Spears' ex-husband, Kevin Federline. You will find pictures, put in Kevin Federline fat or overweight, and you will see that Kevin isn't a real man. You can see the distended belly that only a female has. You will see the spread of his hips, because this is someone who was a professional dancer on testosterone. Okay. And they have to cycle off the testosterone in order to get pregnant. It's so weird. It's so bizarre that most of the average public cannot even conceptualize it, Simone.
Well, I want to. This is so crazy. I understand there's some people out there that generally have these issues, but this is like intentional abuse on these children. I keep getting back to that, but
yes,
who's helping these children? Why are they must just be laughing their heads off at us.
Well, they mock us constantly. They give us little clues and they laugh at us. but I don't want to make light of what happens, because I think this is generational Luciferianism. I believe this is generational transgenderism, just in transgenderism. I think you can look at someone like Tippi Hedren and that family, right? That's a
Jamie Lee
man.
Curtis,
Yes, Jamie Lee Curtis,
Daryl
Melanie Griffith.
Hannah,
Yes,
Glenn Close,
yes, close
Reese
but no cigar,
Witherspoon,
right? Yes,
Hillary. They're all men's. Hillary is a man's name until 100
right.
years ago.
Yes, yes,
Cameron. These are all men's
yes,
names. If they're
yes,
telling you who they are, I saw Jessica Alba
yes,
in an interview once, and she said she was a man, and everyone started laughing. She was on
yes,
like a truth or lie show, like a game
yeah,
show, celebrity thing. And she
yes.
admits that she's a man. She's married to Justin Timberlake now, right?
Are you? Oh, you're talking about Jessica Alba. Alba is married to someone named Cash Warren, and
Oh, I see.
they're multimillionaires. They're in the clothing industry. These people, and I know some people are never going to be able to conceptualize that Jessica Alba could be a man, but she even told us that she was a man. And
Well,
that's the thing. People will never be able to break their own paradigms about this.
well, remember when in the 80s and early 90s when people like Jodie Foster and Julia Roberts and all those actresses always wore suits and ties all the time?
Yes.
They were saying it then.
Yes, they were showing us. So what they are, they're feminized men. And it's literally a psyop on the public. And they show us. I want to ask people, why is it that you constantly see your celebrity throwing up the devil hand sign? Because there are going to be people who say these are not gender benders and there's no occult practice. Tell me why they're constantly throwing up the devil hand sign. Okay, they're not at a rock concert. Tell me why they cover one eye. Okay, this is a secret, clandestine group of people who are ruling over us. Okay, and these Hollywood types are their puppets. I'm not even sure that some of these people haven't had satanic ritual abuse, right?
Oh, of
I mean,
course.
I
Of
think that
course.
yes, I think that it all comes down to abusing the child and having a disregard for humanity.
Well, if you understand Project Paperclip and all the Nazi experiments and everything were brought over to the United States. And as you can watch the movie Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts, they openly talk
Yes,
about the MK that was supposedly canceled, but is still going on. All that
right.
mind control and all the movies they make about how horrible the war is, they've
Mm-hmm.
used all of that on us, the public, since the war to traumatize and change our whole mindset. So
That's part of what all these false flag events are. They are constantly traumatizing us. If there isn't a fire or a tsunami or an explosion and a child being murdered and someone being shot, this is all about control and this chaos method. They abdo chaos, order out of chaos. They purposely cause chaos in our lives because they don't want us to look inward. They don't want us to seek God. They don't want us to understand where we are in this world. They don't want us looking in.
well, I watch this one fellow who does family trees. And
Mm-hmm.
during that Carl Rittenhouse and Jesse Smollett, those were kind of going on at the same time.
Right, right.
All those cases that were in the court. Well,
Yes.
he traced both of them back to the same grandfather in Germany who was a high level Illuminati. These people are generational trauma. That's their job. They're actors. Like
Yes. Yeah.
Shakespeare said, each man plays his part. Life is a stage.
I guarantee you, every one we see on TV, these are actors. And I'm talking about the Oval Office. These people are gender inverted. Okay. If someone isn't going to be honest about their very gender, how can we believe anything else that comes out of their mouth?
And like you said, they've been severely traumatized. And what you understand if you read about this is they actually fracture their minds. And this is the only way that they can function. So these people, and like you said, have most likely been generationally traumatized. Remember, there was that one school where they were taking all the kids, Ghislaine Maxwell's sister has, I forget what it was, and that guy went to jail for that. And they were keeping the kids they were torturing the babies and changing their nannies every day and keeping them in a white room. And they traumatized them since birth. If you listen, I listened to an interview with Angelina Jolie once. Oh, the Rainbow Coalition.
Right.
So I listened to her once, and that's what was happening to her as a child. And she was talking about why she has trouble connecting with people. I mean,
Well,
it's a whole other story, but I believe that
right.
people like her generationally are born into this system. So as a Christian person, you have to have some empathy, but
Certainly.
you realized in order to survive, they've had to do what they've had to do. So it's a really crazy psychology.
I think it's a combination of generational abuse, but I think it's also a Faustian deal. You know,
Yes.
As you know, I have treated celebrities. I have literally treated celebrities who have 5 mansions each. Okay, so these people live these elaborate lives. So for their trauma and for their service to the queen, they get to live lavish lives. Now, I wouldn't wish that upon anyone.
They can take it away from them at any time.
Right. I mean, I think these people have to stay in line and toe the party line.
Of course.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look at Michael Jackson, look at Elvis Presley, look at Marilyn, look at all these people that supposedly had everything and they had nothing. And when you die, you see all the leeches and mooches around them. What was Michael Jackson up to that he had to put himself to sleep at night with an anesthesia?
Right, right. I mean, and to be honest with you, I don't know which. I'll be honest. I know that these people also do death hoaxes. Of course, there are celebrities who die, but I think there are also death hoax. And here we go again. What was Michael Jackson accused of?
Of course.
Okay, we go right back to pedophilia, and you'll probably notice in some of my videos I get very, very upset, and it's because it is the subversion of our sexuality. It is the destruction of traditional families, i.e., mother and father. And it is always the victimization of children. They are they're doing culture creation, Simone. Culture creation. They are shaping this culture into being gender fluid, okay, which destroys the family.
Of course it does, and it destroys people. So many of the people, you can go on the internet, and I'm sure maybe it did work for some people, especially people maybe who were born with both sexes, things like that, of course.
Right.
But suicide rate is higher among transgenders than it is among the general population. And you have a lot of people on the internet that are online saying they're trying to talk to other people considering it because they were felt pressured by society. There's so much support. Movie stars are involved sometimes with the LA or New York area where the movie stars come over and tell them, oh, you're so strong. This is really disturbing issue. Like I've said on my other channels, this is an attack on transgenderism. This is a commercial business. If they cure cancer, what are they going to use all the hospitals for?
Right.
Thought about that?
Right. Yes. I believe that we are going to see a huge influx of young people who have been gaslighted into believing that gender is fluid. We've already, as you said, had people coming out and saying, you know, I wish I hadn't done this. But people get caught up in this very, very, like you said, commercialized, Hollywood-esque gender fluidity. And I know that there are going to be, over the next decade, many, many people who have ruined their bodies and ruined their lives through falling for this agenda.
Well, I get back to the children. How they can't buy a pack of cigarettes. They have to see their parents' permission for a PG movie. I don't understand
That's
how
well,
the parents have to be liable. Now everybody's like patting them on the back. Oh, you're so strong. Give me a break. These people are trying to normalize this practice before the general public finds out, because they know that people are going to turn on them. So they're trying to normalize it right now. That's what really gets under my skin.
honestly, these parents are culpable. Many of them are social justice warriors, right? Who are, who do you think introduces this stuff to many kids? I'm sorry, when a 3-year-old little boy says, I want to play with dolls and I want to dress in girls' clothing, it is the parents that have to buy it.
Of
Okay.
course.
A little boy can say, I want to be a dinosaur. It doesn't make him a dinosaur.
Of
Okay. We're
course.
talking about normal development. And this has been just pushed down our throat. I don't call anyone they, their, them. Okay. I'm not going to call someone a plural. You are either male or female. That's it. You might be a trans person, but you're not actually transing anything. Okay. Because you can't change your gender. It is impossible. It's impossible to change your gender. And I know that's not a popular thing to say.
Well, you know me, I'm somehow going to connect this to the history of the financial system.
Well, the almighty dollar does rule the world, right?
Right. Well, so right now you've given us some really great information and stuff to think about, but you and I could start chatting forever. So we're getting into an hour here. So I
Okay.
put together a little history of a background on the British monarchy and who they really descend from that might be helpful to my viewers. As many of you are aware, the royal lines of England have been replaced with people who descend from the bloodlines of the fallen nation of Khazaria. Under threat of death, the Kazarian ruling class, also known as the Black nobility, fled into Germany. Eventually, they migrated into the rest of Europe and Britain. Usury, the practice of loaning money with interest, was illegal in European courts until this group of people who were escaping death for their many crimes against children and people of other nations in neighboring countries arrived in Germany. Although they had forcibly been converted to Judaism and the Muslim religion, they continued to secretly practice the ancient worship of Baal. And this is by no means an attack on those two faiths and the God-fearing people who follow him. Just an overview of the leaders of Khazaria, who are the descendants of Japheth, not of Shem, and their well-documented crimes. Here is a brief history of that infiltration. And then I'll put a link to the full article in the comments section below. There's a lot of information and books written about this. This history has been removed from the Western history books, but it's still taught in other parts of the world. I myself learned about it in Turkey. The Bauer Rothschild had 5 sons who infiltrated and took over European banking and the City of London's central banking system through various crafty and covert operations, including a false report of the Napoleon winning against the British when he actually lost. This allowed the Rothschilds to use fraud and deception to steal the wealth of the English nobility and the landed gentry. They made business investments in the City of London banking institutions and were tricked out of their centuries-old fortunes. Now, remember from our previous shows, the City of London is not part of Great Britain or part of England. It is an ancient Roman stronghold that remains under the jurisdiction and control of the Roman Catholic Pope to this day, and who the Rothschilds also serve. The Rothschilds set up a private fiat banking system that specialized in making counterfeit money from nothing, charging usury to the British people and using what should have been their own money. This system is the same system that was put in place in the United States and controls most world governments today. This was the black art of Babylonian money magic, and that's magic with a K. They claim to be insiders, that such technology and secret money power was provided to them by Baal because of their frequent child bleeding out and sacrifice rituals to Baal. Once they had infiltrated and hijacked the British banking system, they interbred with the British royals and infiltrated and completely hijacked all of England and all of its major institutions. Some experts believe that the Rothschilds genocided the royal family members by staging secretly managed illicit and adulterate breeding with their own Kazarian men in order to replace the royals with their own pretenders to the throne. Because the KM claims to have personal partnership with Baal, aka the devil, Lucifer, Saturn, Apollo, he has many names, because of their sacrifices to him. They detest any kings who rule under the authority of the God Almighty, because most feel a responsibility to make sure their own people are protected from infiltrators and treasonous enemies at the gates. In the 1600s, the KM murdered the British royals and substituted their own fakes. In the 1700s, they murdered the French royals. Right before World War I, they murder Austrian Archduke Ferdinand to start World War I. In 1917, they assembled their KM army, the Bolsheviks, and infiltrated and hijacked Russia. They murdered the Tsar and his family in cold blood. They bayonet his favorite daughter through the chest, and they steal all the silver and gold and art treasures of the Russian Empire. Right before World War II, they murder the Austrian and German royals. Then they get rid of the Chinese royals and disempower the Japanese ruler. If people want a detailed explanation of how the Rothschild banking cartel infiltrated China and put communism in place, please go to my China podcast from a few months ago. The Kazarian Mafia's intense hatred of anyone who professes a faith in any god but their own Baal has motivated them to murder kings and royalty and make sure they can never rule. They have done the same with the American presidents, running sophisticated covert operations to disempower them. If that doesn't work, the KM assassinates them. The same thing they did to McKinley, Lincoln, and JFK. The KM wants to eliminate any strong leaders or elected officials who dare to assist their Babylonian money magic power or their covert power that they gain from the deployment of their human compromise network. The United Nations itself is a brainchild of this group, and its goals have been and are being implemented on society right now. Michelle, do you have anything to add to that brief overview of the ancestors of the British royal family?
Oh my, I think you've covered a broad area. I would just say I would encourage people to question your view of history. We have to realize that it is the winners who write these histories. And so we should be careful when just assuming that the timeline that they give us is accurate.
Of
That
course.
that the stories that they give us are accurate. But I do believe that there is a secret cabal coming from the Khazars, from the Caucasus Mountains. I believe that these people are covert and they have infiltrated the system. And I do believe this goes all the way back to Babylon.
Of course. Of course. And they don't deny that. In many instances, when you read their documents and their paperwork, there is a constant reference to that, and the gods that they worship and the things that they do are all part of the ancient Babylonian system.
Yes, and we have to remember that the Masons, Albert Pike, okay, he told us that he would control the world. He literally set up 3 world wars. And believe me, if you don't think we're at war, we are, except it is a culture war. And so this is the royal families are involved in Freemasonry. That's the tool they use. And as far as people who think that the Windsors truly rule, you can find a picture of a Rothschild with his finger on the chest of Charles.
Oh, of course. Of course,
So,
the City of London owns the royal family. They lost all their power. When the British Empire fell apart, they were bankrupt.
Yes.
After wars, after all of that, people didn't want the monarchy anymore. So they are literally the mouthpieces for the City of London. When people speak of the Crown Corporation, not the Queen.
Right.
Those are two different, people get that confused. The Crown Corporation is the City of London, who owns the world banking system and all the major corporations in the world. That's not the Queen of England,
That's right.
of course. So, and I just to touch base a little bit now that we're talking about the royal family again. I know that you and I originally had a show where we discussed the Jeffrey Epstein connection and Ghislaine Maxwell, how they were openly in and out, how Prince Andrews had his scandal. I just recently, and this might be a good book for your viewers and my viewers to look up. It's called Jeffrey Epstein Super Spy. And it was written by this young girl who was groomed by the Epstein family and held as a sex slave with the Fortune 500 CEO for 20 years. And she published the book about 10 years ago, and she's just in the process of publishing it again with some more added sections. So it's quite a large book. But people are always saying, oh, all these conspiracies, they don't come together. They're all separate people working. But you can go back, and I think I was discussing with you this earlier. You did a show on Ghislaine Maxwell and her family. And I mean, her sisters have Adam's apple. There's no question that they're men. But
Yes.
what about Epstein and all of the sexualization? They throw us off with all those stories. He was really a super spy that was selling out our country, but they're going to focus on the young girls, correct?
Right. I mean, I'll be honest. I've never taken a really close look at Epstein,
I see.
but I believe that the Maxwell family is full of gender cons, and in a way, it's almost inconsequential because what I think even trumps that. I hate to use the word Trump, but I think what trumps that is that these were Mossad agents,
Of
right?
course. Well,
These are
this is
Mossad agents who have a predilection towards children. That should be the main thing, regardless of their gender. They're child abusers.
well, they're from this same group, right? These people
Yes.
who practice these ancient occult practices, and they're using child trafficking, drug trafficking to fund their operations, but also to keep. Do you think that all these people who make a Faustian deal or sell their soul to the devil and are rich and famous for 5 years, and then the people show up and say, you've got to do this now, that they all want to do it? They're
I
human.
believe
They don't want to do it. They regret it, and they are forced in. They use this. That's why I'm bringing it in. I'm trying to
the
show
blackmail, right?
connection
Blackmail.
to the
Yeah.
blackmail and
Yeah.
extortion,
Yeah.
and even the way they turned that case into a mind control situation where we worried about these young girls and not worried about the fact that they've stolen all of our technology and our nuclear secrets for the last
Yes.
30 years and are
I
bombing the hell out of the Middle East.
Exactly. I
So,
think that sometimes these things are distractions, right? These are
right.
what we have to realize, that when we say the world is a stage, we mean it. I mean, they will purposely, it is bred in circuses, just like they did in ancient Rome. Remember, all roads do lead to Rome.
Of
And
course.
they did, that's what these events were, right? You feed a man to a lion, or you let the man kill the lion. This is just a modern version of that. You feed the public, you make them
Yes.
fat and docile, but this is so they can do their clandestine new world order. Literally, I know it sounds like a 1990s conspiracy, but the new world order is real. They are further perpetuating their expansion, okay? And they are usurping authority over countries that still want to be independent.
Well, we touched on the whole connection to Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, even all these people who were heavily involved in business deals together in Ohio, and all had the planes with the secret openings. And so
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit about what Victoria's Secret is based on? And now that we've discussed all this, Some
Oh,
may be guessing what Queen Victoria's real secret was.
right. Well, for those that don't know, Lex Wexner owned a bunch of things in addition to Victoria's Secret. And Lex Wexner created this storyline that it's a woman's boudoir and it's a fake person that they base this story on, this very elegant woman. No, that's not what it is. It's drag queen Victoria. The reason for the laciness and everything and the clothing, that elaborate regalia for the royal families, is to hide the gender of the drag queen. So Lex Wexner's Victoria's Secret, the secret is Victoria has a penis, or at least used to. And that was actually my awakening, Simone. You know that. My very first awakening was Victoria's Secret model answering the door while I was going to treat an athlete. And I realized it was a man. And this was the beginning of the end. You see, I thought I had arrived. I thought I was going to be treating all these rock stars and celebrities, and I was just going to be, just living it up. But instead, and I believe this is God, and I don't believe I'm just chosen or anything, but I believe God said, wake up, that's a man. Okay, look at the anatomy. I knew instantly, Simone, the square jaw, the bulging trachea, the bulging sternocleidomastoid, the thick neck. It was just, even with the feminization, I knew it. And so this, honestly, I am grateful to Lex Wexner in a strange way, because by putting secret trans men in front of us, which, by the way, is a horrible image for little girls and women to try to emulate an anorexic, emaciated male.
Well, last time I checked, they were in bankruptcy and no one would buy them. So
yes, well,
yeah,
now the trend is to be morbidly obese and embrace it. I think that's also negative, right?
well, or
So,
extremely skinny, like they see all the women on TV and who are really
indeed.
men. And I know I have a young cousin who dealt with this in high school
Yes.
because she was trying to look like the models on TV, and she was a pretty girl with a good figure, but she was being distorted by this. And even how I've been equating it to these people are Luciferians. All the
Yes.
Victoria's Secret models have wings.
Yes. Yeah.
Lucifer disguised himself as a beautiful being of light, correct?
Yes. Yes. I believe that this partial, I know it's tongue in cheek to have the wings on the angels, but I do believe that these people are in secret worshiping the fallen ones.
Oh, of
I,
course.
I believe it. And so, in a way, it's an homage to them. We don't know what these people's real spiritual practice is. What sorts of ceremonies and things do they do behind closed doors? You and I will never know, not fully, because we're not in the club, right? They let me into the perimeter. I've treated numerous celebrities, but they didn't let me in. I was not, no one disclosed anything to me.
Of course.
I tried to be like a detective, Simone, but I could only find out so much because I'm not part of the club.
Well, you don't want to be. So I'm thankful that you're
No.
not. Otherwise, we couldn't be friends.
Yes. Oh, yes. I just want to mention real briefly. I'm not going to give attention to the channel. I won't say the name, but there's a channel out there. People do hit pieces on me because
do
they
they?
can't. Yeah. And so there's someone who's recently called me a shill, and it's another trans investigation channel. I won't highlight who it is, but the reason that people can't believe that someone who treated celebrities can be a real human being, a real woman. Simone, have you and I met in person? Am I a woman?
Yes, you're a woman, and I've met a lot of celebrities, and I was a woman.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I mean,
I
I've never
worked in
alluded to
Hollywood for
that.
5 years for a Academy Award winning stars production company. So I've seen
Exactly.
this stuff firsthand too. I just couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was until my eyes were open. The world is having the veil lifted, and those of us who want to see what's really out there and love the world for what it truly is are going to have our eyes open even further as time goes up over the next few years, I believe.
Yes,
I don't know what else
I
I'm
believe.
going to learn that's going to shock me.
Well, gosh, I don't even, I'm afraid of what I'll learn next. I don't want to know. I don't want
Okay.
to know.
Well, I think we should leave it on that note. I think, we're getting into them almost hour and a half show. You and I can
Yes.
never just talk for an hour. I just wanted to thank you for coming on tonight and illustrating these trans practices and confirming from someone who lives inside the system that these mass deceptions are being paid on the people the everyday people and the people in the public eye are perpetrating this fraud on the public.
Thank you, Simone.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. This has been quite entertaining. I hope that the listeners now have a better understanding of how the Kazarian Mafia took over England and how the British royal family was removed and replaced with transgenders that descend from a foreign mafia criminal cartel. So next time you're buying a magazine or watching an interview with one of these people, try and remember who they really are and what their true ambitions are. Again, they are agents of the New World Order banking criminal cartel who work to bring about the financial collapse of the world of currencies and take control of the riches and resources of the entire planet for their god, Satan, otherwise known as Baal, Lucifer, the One, Moloch, or the Owl. And these are their words, not mine. These people are the servants of the United Nations goals of transgendering the world population, destroying the family unit, and creating a one world government that has been discussed in many previous podcasts. They are not working on our behalf, and they do not care about us, our life, or our future. They are told what to say and do and are part of the massive mind control society is experiencing all over us today. We have to stop putting them on pedestals, and we must remember, while these same groups deny the existence of the God of the Abrahamic faith and continue to remove him from the public discourse, they are using our blood, our money, and our resources to bring about the absolute rule of their God, Lucifer, and take control of our children. Remember, Ephesians 6:12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. America fought a war to escape the rule and crimes of this group, so we cannot give them any more power and must reject their agendas today. All right, then. That's my message.
Well, until next time, Simone, and thank you for your dedication to uncovering the truth.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much for giving my listeners some interesting topics to explore and taking the time to chat with me today. You've given us some very important information that will help us understand and confirm some of the events that are occurring around us today. Please come back and talk with us again soon.
I will. Bye-bye.
As always, please do your own research and come to your own conclusions. This presentation is made in hopes that never again will the truth be lost in translation. Thank you for listening. This is Simone and Michelle signing off for today.